what happens if/when purchase prices are driven to a point where even on the 40-year mortgage, it's still not sustainable, or people, find ourselves at another issue with affordability. What happens at that point? And that's what I'm saying.
So you're saying that pretty much you're just moving the marker.
That's all it is.
Exactly. As far as being affordable still.
Right. We're still going to find ourselves at the same issue because people will eventually not be able to afford that 40-year mortgage, and now we're going to have to figure out something else.
Hey, welcome to Uncommon State of Mind, where we debate different ways to leverage your next investment to create time freedom, legacy impact, and generational wealth so you can live that uncommon life. But in order to do that, you must be uncommon. My name is Joey, a.k.a. Mr. J. Mays.
Hey, and I'm AD, also known as AD, the Fly Realtor.
What's going on, guys? So today we have an interesting debate for you today. It has to do with 40-year mortgages, something that I believe was it Bigger Pockets brought up?
I mean, it's kind of been floating around. Really, it's a little new to the industry. It really came up because of, the problems with affordability that sprung up during the pandemic, or after the pandemic, with high interest rates and all that.
Okay.
Yeah,
that's interesting. So what is it exactly? So they're just offering 40-year mortgages for what type? Is it just like any type of property, single family home?
Oh, I don't know the specifics, but I know it's definitely being offered to like for standard residential loans. So yeah, primary living dwellings they're offering these loans for. I don't know if there's any kind of properties that they're not offering them on. I know they're not that easy to get a hold of yet, but just as a concept, 40-year mortgages. I'm sure there's like pros and cons to it. You know what I mean?
100%. I see more cons and pros. But prior to us actually getting into that, I did want to ask, are there specific institutions that are lending this? Is it specifically for investors, or could regular homeowners get in on this as well?
Yeah, I think there's I'm positive that there are just standard loans like for owner-occupied, loans that are going for 40 years, because I mean, the overall idea is that if you stretch out the amount of time to have the mortgage, then that decreases the monthly payment for the individual or the people who are paying that mortgage off.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and take a strong stance. I am 100%, 110% for 110% for 40-year mortgages. Like, it's just, to me, I don't see a downside, really, like, in my opinion.
Right. I hear you.
Yeah, I just don't see it. Like, and obviously we're going to have a little back and forth, but you say there are some downsides if someone were to go ahead and, possibly obtain one of these 40-year mortgages.
Yeah, I mean, overall, like, Can I see a situation or situations in which it makes sense and it works? Yes. But just overall as a general, like, okay, 40-year mortgage, like, I don't know if I'm for it. But for the sake of this show, I'm not for it. I'm against it, just to make sure we're on clear different sides here, because, all right, so like, first of all, what is your reasoning for wanting the 40-year mortgage?
Well, okay, we have to kind of differentiate between, an average individual with a family looking to acquire property to have and own and live their forever dreams in. And we also have to then take in consideration what this show is mainly about, and that's the,
investment as
real estate. First time real estate investor. If we're talking about a family, that's looking to live in that property, okay, maybe that's not the best idea. But at the same time, it still can be if we're talking about overall bringing down your monthly payment, if that's going to be more affordable for you, that way you can have a better quality of life as a family, that's definitely something that, even though it's going to take you a lot longer to pay down this property, and a crap ton of your cash is going to go towards the interest. Like, if it makes your living conditions, your day-to-day, easier, your quality of life better, I can see why you'd want to do that. Of course, the faster you're able to pay off a property, the faster you own that asset. You know what I mean? But I see that. But as an investor, I'll take a 50-year mortgage.
I was like, tack on another 10 years.
I'm just thinking about this like, okay, even if depending on how actually, it doesn't even really matter the strategy, because either way you're saving money. Like, you know what I'm saying? So you're telling me I can go on a 30-year mortgage. I'm probably paying, depending on the property, say it's a multifamily, I'm paying like $4,200 a month or something like that. And just because I decided to do a 40-year mortgage, it's down to like $3,500 or something. Like, that just makes way too much sense to me, because I know that my net income is going to increase by however much less I'm paying in the mortgage. So I'm like, oh yeah, even if I did have the aspirations of paying down that property, I could probably do so faster because I have a higher net income each month if I were to do some sort of velocity banking strategy.
I mean, I get that as a whole. And yes, if we're just looking at it, you know, if I could pick scenarios in which I'm for it and the scenarios in which I'm against it, my answer might be a little different. But just as far as a whole, I don't know if I'm for it, because, so first of all, one thing that happens a lot of times is, like, in society or in the government or politics or whatever, we make a decision to influence one behavior, but then we don't often see what the ramifications of that decision is until after the fact. So, for example, something like this, where, okay, we have an issue with affordability. People aren't able to afford homes at specific interest rates, yada, yada, yada. So then let's make a 40-year mortgage. So now it's going to decrease the monthly payment. That all sounds good until what's going to happen now. Now the sellers are going to start increasing the asking prices for these properties, because now more people qualify for higher amounts. It's like, you know what? On a 30-year mortgage, you wouldn't have qualified for a $750,000 loan. But on a 40-year mortgage, you qualify for it. So now the seller's like, well, shoot, more people qualify. Let me make it $850. You know what I mean? Like, sure. Where does that stop? Because it's really like how economics works. So we saw the low interest rates. Interest rates went low. People were like, all right, higher price for the property. It's going to be the same thing. There's more affordability. More people there's a larger pool of people who actually have access to buying this property. Because what that does is also it's going to create more demand, because more people are now going to find themselves in a situation where they feel like it's affordable. So because there's more affordability, quote unquote affordability, prices are just going to increase to another astronomical level where affordability, even on a 40-year mortgage, is now going to decrease.
Okay. So I'm listening to you and I'm like, when is he going to get to the bad part? Like, I'm just listening and I'm
everything I said is like, the bad part.
I'm like, hold on. So I'm like, wait a second. So this sounds like a great move for real estate in general. So you're telling me there's going to be more people eligible to buy a property that I list for higher than asking price? Like, oh my God. Like you kidding me? Like, so I'm just saying.
It sounds good to me.
So, hey, I'm gonna have more options and buying power for a property that I may not have been able to afford back in the day, because I know that I can qualify for it now. Mm-hmm. Second, if I'm the seller, I can now jump my prices up and, possibly get this property sold for, hundreds of $1,000s more than I intended.
I get you.
So I'm like, I really don't see the drawdown. And on top of that, you also have a lower monthly payment, and you own an asset that costs way more than what it would usually cost. I'm like, where's the downside?
My point is, it's not really a fix. It's a Band-Aid as opposed to healing, because all it's going to do is make us come back to the same issue where even on a 40-year mortgage, oh, this just isn't sustainable, or these prices are too high. What are we going to do now? So, that's where the next 10 years come into play. 50-year mortgage.
So maybe I just don't know. Like, I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, where can I really pinpoint? Like, everything that you said just sounds great to me. Unless you know, like I'm just like, okay, I'm sorry. I'm just like, you're telling me I could afford.
I'm still looking for the problem.
You know what I'm saying? Like I have more affordability. I could afford more properties. You know what I'm saying? When I get into this property, it's probably going to be worth. I'm buying it for higher, but it's going to be worth that much more. You know what I mean? And then on top of getting an asset that's worth more than I intended, I'm also going to be paying less mortgage than what I would normally pay on a 30-year. I'm like, this just sounds like a win-win-win to me.
All right. So you know what? How about this? So now if it is going to be a 40-year mortgage, think about it this way. So, just to give you a quick idea of how mortgages work, when you first start a mortgage, the first so many years, like pretty much 11 to 15 years of that, you're paying off primarily interest. So it's not until after that, once you get into the second half of that mortgage or the expected time for that mortgage, the second part of that 30 years, that's when you start really eating into the principal. So now if the mortgage is going to be like amortized for 10 more years, now it's going to be a longer time before you even eat into that principal. Mm-hmm. So depending on how you buy real estate, if you're buying real estate purely for the monthly cash flow, that's one thing. But if you're also buying real estate for the equity build, that's where it's going to affect you again, because now you're not going to have as much equity in the property, and if you don't have a lot of equity in the property, if the property, let's say you have a lot of equity in the property. If the property appreciates for a small amount of money, that's still beneficial to you because you have so much equity. The less equity you have, the more appreciation you need in order to, substantiate that lack of equity, or vice versa. I hope I'm explaining that properly.
No, I understand.
So now what I'm trying to say is that, so now we're going to get into a situation where developing equity is going to be a lot harder. Now people are going to just have these properties, but you're spending so much time paying down interest. When do you actually get to the point where you're digging into that principal?
Right. No, and that's a fair assessment of this particular issue. But once again, it kind of comes with the territory of getting a 40-year mortgage instead of a 30. You kind of know that up front. You know what I'm saying? You understand that.
You know that.
Like, you kind of understand that. Like, you understand that it's going to take you 10 more years to pay this property off, opposed to getting it done in 30. Like, and obviously, since it's going to take 10 more years, you're going to spend more money over time. But at the end of the day, that's where you kind of have your trade-off. Like, that's really the only downside to it. That's really the only downside in my eyes, is the fact that it's going to take you longer to own this particular asset. But what is the trade-off for that? Is the trade-off that you have a higher and better quality of life because you're saving an additional $500, $1,000 in mortgage, or and even if that was a trade-off, and you still wanted to pay, and you still wanted to, attack the principal of that payment, even just based off of the extra amount of cash that you're saving, if you're a regular homeowner who's just living in this property, or making if you were an investor, you can put that towards the principal itself. You know what I'm saying? Which can also speed down or speed up the payment of that property. You know what I'm saying? Because that payment that would have went to the mortgage that would have been subject to that interest rate is now free cash you can put directly to mortgage or directly to the principal.
I get you. I do get that. I just feel like if you were going to, it sounds good to say that in practicality, like, oh, the money you save, you could just put it back towards the principal. Like, people aren't going to do that. Like, people are not going to do that. I'm sorry.
I'm not saying that people are automatically going to do that. But if you have that option, like, yes, you're not, unless you're thinking about real estate and you're thinking about, the end goal early, that's probably not going to come across your mind. But if that is something that and everybody who's watching this podcast should be thinking about, that's definitely an avenue that should be down your mind. You're always looking for, even your best exit strategy, and knowing and understanding the time of payoff for a specific asset. If you plan ahead and you're like, okay, I know that I can make a specific amount of cash per month, and put this towards my mortgage. I mean, that's what anybody who's really trying to be financially free does. You know, in any type of business aspect, you always look for those exit strategies. So that's what I would say to that, man. Like, I feel like there's just very little drawdown. I get it. I 100% understand.
Man,
like, yeah, it's going to take longer to pay off this. It's going to take longer to pay off this asset. A lot of your payment's going to go to interest. You know, things that are going to be things that suck. They do suck. But like,
right.
I feel like the trade-off for those is just so much better. Like, you talked about having more buyers in the market who could afford that property. You talk about prices being
see, that's where the thing is. We have more buyers who can afford a specific purchase price.
Okay.
But purchase prices will now go up. Okay. You know, because it's going to drive what happens when purchase prices are driven to a point where even on the 40-year mortgage it's still not sustainable, or people we find ourselves at another issue with affordability. What happens at that point? And that's what I'm saying.
So you're saying that pretty much you're just moving the marker.
That's all it is.
Exactly. As far as being affordable still.
Right. We're still going to find ourselves at the same issue because people will eventually not be able to afford that 40-year mortgage. And now we're going to have to figure out something else, you know, to work out where, okay, now we have a higher mortgage. We have longer term for paying down the interest. We have higher prices. Like, what's going to get?
So I think you just made me really understand, well, you know, that issue in itself. And I agree with you there, because wherever there's money to be made in that gap, people
will always find a way. Exactly.
Eat it up.
Right. Like, a few weeks ago when we were talking about taxes and things like that, and I mentioned something to the effect of, you know, people could give more raises, or the cost of goods could be cheaper if companies are saving on taxes. And you're like, they're not going to do that. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, they're just going to pocket that money or go do what they want to do with it. And it's like, it's the same thing. Just because you're now saving, we saw the effect of that during the pandemic. Like, oh, interest rates were low. People are going to be able to afford more. They can save more money on their payment. All it did was drive real estate to record level highs, because people saw that there was more opportunity. So I don't know if society has it in them to not squeeze everything out of every, like, you know what I mean? Like, the same way we treat the earth, like, we squeeze all the resources out of it. You know what I mean? Like, every opportunity, society is going to squeeze whatever they can to get every little penny. So it'll be nice if we just had a thing where people were like, oh, okay, like, I was okay with the amount I was going to sell my property at. So now, because a 40-year mortgage is available, I'm not going to drive the price up, but that's not going to happen.
So that makes sense. So as you know, I went to school in South Dakota, and they had, you know, it was the Great Plains, and we had to learn a little bit of history about that area. And they talked about, like, grazing lands for, like, their livestock and things. And they had this one scenario, it was called, like, the tragedy of the commons, where, like, they're trying to save, like, grazing grass for like, I don't know, maybe future cattle or something like that.
Okay.
The cattle they're just going to eat the grass anyway. So no matter how much you try to, like, preserve, or you try to, like, you know, stave off from consuming and wiping out these grazing lands, that are going to get consumed anyway.
Right.
So, you know, and that always stuck with me, because that's just so relevant to life. I feel like it's the same scenario. I feel like over time that would happen, but in that sweet spot, you know what I'm saying? Just like there was in 2020, there's a lot of money to be made.
Yeah. No, I get you. Honestly, I will admit, I am thinking more so about standard buyers as opposed to investors or people working to become investors, because, you know, I've said this many times, as much as I'm a huge supporter of, like, investing in real estate, buying real estate for investment purposes, I understand that some people don't necessarily want to be an investor, but just understand buying a home is better than renting long term. You know, and I get it. They're trying to do this whole, like, oh, it's more affordable to rent. Like, I get everything you're trying to say, but there's very little anybody could do to convince me why it's better to rent than it is to actually own where you live. Just for the mere fact that you can't get kicked out of a home you own in 30 to 60 days. It takes longer. You know what I mean? There's all kinds of methods you can go through to make sure if you're communicating and doing your best to like stay in touch with the bank or the lender, whoever it may be, there's a lot of ways to like make sure you stay in your home or keep your home.
Yeah.
So again, I'll always be a supporter of buying property as opposed to just renting property forever. Yeah. So yes,
dude, there was one. This is kind of off subject, but just to like kind of like play the devil's advocate here. There was this one strategy. It was this business owner, because we do short-term rentals, and there's this business owner who rented out one of my partner's units for like a year. He's like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna live here, man. It's like a penthouse. It's really nice. It costs like $6,000 a month or something like that. But I forgot what the loophole was. But anyways, there's a way that he got that the entire expense of his rent written off for his business. So like he would spend all this money for rent, but like at the end of the year, he could write off the entirety that he spent.
Like, interesting. Was he using it as an office?
Well, he was using it for it was specifically for some sort of business.
Oh, okay.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm like, that's just like
works for him. Exactly. See, but even like that. So I bet you your partner, I wouldn't doubt if that caused your partner to go back and look like, you know what, how about I market this towards people doing the same thing or similar, and I can charge a higher amount because they're writing it off anyway. Yeah. So now what does that do? He saw the opportunity. Now it's going to be harder for the regular person to go rent that place because somebody else is going to rent it, write it off on their business. And, you know, so we see it just keeps on. It's just going to be a cycle of lack of affordability, you know. And also what I think it does is it'll, especially right now, while it's so fresh and so new as a 4-year mortgage, I think it's only been around, I think, for like the last 2 to 3 years. It's really like post-pandemic. It hasn't been this like, I don't think it's been a popular thing. It's not even popular now, but it wasn't this widespread thing until very recently. And that's because of the lack of affordability. So we're just going to see a situation in which we get back to that same level. Like, it's just going to be the same thing back and over again.
What I will say is, like, if you're an investor, though, what the hell, dude? I'll take advantage.
Yeah, see, so for an investor, like for a real investor, it makes a lot of sense to me. It makes a lot more sense because you can make it make more sense because if you're I don't like debt, okay? I don't like debt as much as anybody, but if you're in business, you have to respect debt. And you have to know how to operate with debt.
Right.
So if I have 10 more years of debt, but that debt is going to make it easier for me to cash flow or to even qualify, because even if I get a DSCR loan, debt service coverage ratio loan, you know, the property has to make a certain amount for the bank, for the lender to approve it.
Right.
You know, so if I can do longer term to decrease that monthly mortgage payment, and then I have a certain amount of cash flow, and now it covers, I mean, it makes a lot of sense for the business owner. But again, like, do we want to, it's crazy because I'm usually on the other side of stuff like this. Yeah. But I'm really usually on the side of the business, or like, especially when it comes to the real estate investor.
Yeah.
But I don't want it to get to the point where, okay, we're taking advantage of this or we're doing things like this. Now, regular people, we already have an issue where regular people who have like decent jobs or okay jobs live in cities where they can't buy a property. You know what I mean? Like, you're priced out of your own city, and the wages that are supposed to be higher because you're in, you know, LA or San Francisco or New York, like your wages are higher. And so again, we go back to this thing where it's like, oh, people make more money, so let's just increase the cost of the property. You know what I mean? Like, it's just what's always going to happen. We're always going to get back to this level of, oh, well, we might as well make the prices go up because we're going to make sure that the very top of people can afford it. Right. And, you know, here we go again. So that's really where I'm at with it. But
you have to respect that point of view. But as an investor, like, being comfortable with debt is something that you just have to learn how to do, especially if, you know, you're able to cash flow the way.
Yeah, and if other people are paying for it, like, that's always been my thing. Like, that's why, like, real estate investing in real estate always made sense. Like not just buying real estate for the sake of having properties, but I mean actually renting it off to where other people are paying the mortgage, other people are covering the reserves and everything that would need to take place for that property. I think it's just too much of a win because, you know, you get all the advantages of having real estate, and one of the most negative attributes, which is paying for it, it's not your responsibility. Well, it's your responsibility, but indirectly it's not your responsibility.
Exactly. So, I mean, you really can't beat that, man. So, I mean, just depending on if you're somebody looking to just own, once again, it's
very
hard to circumstance. Depending on your circumstance,
it's hard to say to just give you a coverall and one overall answer,
because one scenario could make more sense. Like if you're like, okay, I know that I could afford this property if it was $500 or $1,000 cheaper. I may be, you know, paying more for it in the future. But once again, I always go back to your quality of life. If you're able to afford those vacations with your family, if you're able to afford those additional groceries, you know what I mean? Like, it's just going to make that quality of life a lot better. I wouldn't mind paying more on the back end so that I can enjoy my quality of life on the front end, even though I'm paying down the debt slower.
That's a good angle. You went the family route, like, you know what I mean? You try to pick at people's hearts. You know, if I can spend time with my family, I'll do 10 more years. Like, I see what you did there. I see what you did there, trying to make people feel you. You know, these are the kind of tactics Joey takes. So he can win you guys over to his side. He pulls at the heartstrings. Oh, the family.
I mean, are we talking?
What about the children? What about the children?
Are we talking truth?
No, but I feel you. That's a good point too. Honestly, that's really something you should take into consideration, which is why I love that we do these debates where we can come at it from different angles, because that's something you definitely need to think about. Like, okay, like how easy do I want it to be to take a vacation? You know what I mean? I'm coming out of a period right now where we've traveled like for every month, and it sounds cool, but it does get tiring after a while. You know, like I'm ready to be finished. You know, like we've had to and it's been like family things like weddings and things of that nature. So it's like, I'm not tripping, but it does get to a point where it's like, okay, I would like to just go home. You know, I just want to go home, and the place I paid to live at, I just want to be there. But, you know, maybe if things were spread out for 40 years, maybe I'm looking at it like, hey, I got money for vacation. What's up? You know what I mean? Let's fly. Let's go. So, you know, these are things you have to think about. It does make sense, because some people definitely, especially if I'm buying real estate younger, that's another thing I'll think about, because if you're an older buying real estate, I don't know if you want to have a mortgage on your credit too much longer, because then, you know, that's going to eat into the time where you can save for retirement, which is a whole nother topic. You know what I mean? Because the longer you're paying a mortgage, or the longer you're paying for whatever, the less that the shorter amount of time you have to aggressively put towards your retirement or whatever your plans are for after you're done working. So that's another thing to think about. But, you know, a lot of considerations overall for this topic. But yeah, we'll see how it unfolds. You know, like I said, this is a new thing, so we'll see what happens as it gets more available and more widespread, what the benefits of a 40-year mortgage are.
Indeed. If we had to be for today, I would say be informed. Be informed on the options that you have on the table. Make sure that you're making the best decision for you and your family, or you and your investment property, because it could pay dividends in the future, y'all. So be informed.
Be informed, be you, and be uncommon.
Stay up.